Sunday, December 8, 2024. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5 Minute News. Our guest today is an organizational psychologist and cult expert, having successfully extracted himself from one in the 1970s. He is the author of 4 books, including The Cult of Trump. Dr. Steven Hassan, welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Thank you, Anthony, so much.
We find ourselves in a very unusual period of American political history, where an authoritarian regime is about to take office. People like yourself and myself, we've been warning of the dangers of Trump's election for the last several years. Even during his previous administration. And yet America voted for a tyrant, many potentially unwittingly, many because of a disinformation campaign pushed by Russia and China and Iran and who only knows. We'll get to that a little bit later. But I first want to talk about this feeling that everyone seems to be feeling right now, where we feel pretty helpless because we know what's coming and the vote is done. And there's nothing we can really feel like we can do about it right now.
Yeah, so I mean, I had that experience myself for the first few days, and all I can say is that action is more important than ever. But of course, I'm a mental health professional, so I want people to take care of themselves and develop strategies to recharge their batteries and probably not spend so many hours on their smartphones or on social media, understanding that we are in the midst of psychological warfare being waged by using some 5,000 data points on each voting American that is profiled in the internet, and algorithms are being directed at us to make us feel helpless, make us feel hopeless, to submit to authoritarianism. And all I can say is it's never been more important to be awake and conscious and be with people in real life, Anthony. To be with people that are your friends, your family, people who have values and care deeply. And I do believe that we all need to have hope. And I think we all need to develop more community and to just really do a self-assessment of what each of us is capable of doing. Not everyone has a show like you do and can reach potentially millions of people at a time. I have a podcast too. It's smaller, but I'm starting to live stream because people have questions and they want to hear from trustworthy sources. That's one thing I really appreciate about your show, Anthony. You're so intelligent and grounded and do your research. But you're also like direct about what are the facts and not going to sugarcoat things to make them make people unnecessarily happy about it. But
could I just say that it's probably worth us pointing out that Donald Trump hasn't quite achieved the success or the mandate that he claims in this election, because the popular vote, now that it's been almost fully counted, he hasn't reached 50%, which suggests that the mandate that he claimed to have had isn't really there. And that still leaves half the voting population as those of us who did not see him as our first choice for president. And that gives me hope, because obviously the results initially were he was, talking as if it was a landslide, and so was the corporate media.
Yeah.
But now we've caught up with the count, because it always takes longer, and he doesn't have that mandate. That should, I hope, make people feel a little better about the state of America going forward.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm an expert in hypnosis. I'm an expert on social media radicalization by cults and such. I'm aware that there are so many hypnotic techniques that were being employed. It's not just disinformation with fallacious advertising, but they were doing stuff to mess around with people emotionally, to drive them to become more extreme on the right, to be more extreme on the left, to get apathetic or to not vote at all or vote for a third party. And honestly, I know too much about hypnosis. It's really not that hard to put a post-hypnotic suggestion in people's minds that when they get to the voting booth, they're going to see the opposite of what they wanted to vote for and vote for that. This is just, complete speculation. I've yet to talk with anybody. But I did want to tell you a quick true story. I interviewed Alva Johnson beginning, it was actually the end of 2023. She had worked on Trump's 2015, 2016 campaign. And she was there when Jeff Sessions went out on stage and endorsed Trump. And she was with him when he came off the stage and said, I hadn't planned to do that. I had no intention of doing that. And he was like bewildered. And I predict that in the coming months, there'll be many very disgruntled Trump voters going, how could I have voted for this? This was not what he said he was going to do. And so for me, I'm really optimistic that the human spirit wants to be free and people don't like to be lied to and exploited. And the thing that I want to emphasize with you tonight is that we need to make an exit ramp for people who are Trumpers, to make it okay when they go, I can't believe what this guy is doing. Instead of going, I told you so, why didn't you listen to me? I want people to be like, tell me more. I know you. You're a good person. I knew that only a matter of time before you would realize what was being done to everybody's minds. They were being hacked.
But that's very interesting, because one of the hardest things has been convincing Trump supporters that they're voting for the wrong team, right? And now, because he claims that he has this mandate and a lot of the actions that he's going to take, it appears, are going to be far more extreme than he kind of talked about in advance. And there will be a great sense of buyer's remorse from a lot of people that voted for him, that maybe that might be finally the thing that makes a lot of people realize that they've been played, and that actually this election was never about them, as he claimed, and it was all about him and these oligarchs that he very much wants to be a part of. And we're starting to see that already with Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, and Ramaswamy saying, oh, well, Rivian, a kind of rival EV company, has been given this huge government handout. That needs to be taken back. Well, hang on a second. You've got the guy from Tesla standing next to you. He stands to benefit. So the corruption is going to be so blatant that maybe people will start to wake up.
Yeah, so I want to use my cult expert hat for a minute and just describe that brainwashing and mind control, and I'm going back to my Mooney experience to reference it personally, but when your mind has been hacked, you have the pseudo cult identity that suppresses your real identity. And the cult identity is programmed to defend against any attack or question against the leader, the doctrine, or the policy. So I've been telling people forever, and I wrote Freedom of Mind and Releasing the Bonds to say, never attack the cult leader, the doctrine or the policy head on, because you're going to make them dig in more and view you as the enemy. So what I've been saying to people now, especially, before Thanksgiving, I was saying, if you have a relative who is a Trumper, Take them by surprise. Say, congratulations, your guy won. You must be very happy. You must be very excited. And then say, tell me what you're most looking forward to when Trump takes office. What are you really excited? What are the things that are most exciting to you? And then you can later get into, is there anything that he's talking about or any person he's suggesting have a government role that you have a question about? But you're not talking down to them and you're not trying to argue or persuade. You're gently, respectfully asking questions. And these questions are a setup for the weeks and months to come.
That's very smart, very, very clever, because it gives them... It's a little bit like talking to Trump, I would presume. If you talk about him, then he's going to give you all the time that you want. And I suppose with these people who voted for him, they need to work out for themselves that, we can't convince them in a single conversation, but they can probably work out for themselves just through their own communication by being asked the right questions, that actually it doesn't all necessarily add up. And obviously, it's early days. He's not been inaugurated yet, but things are going to be very different in a month or two's time.
Right. So one of the theses in my book, The Cult of Trump, is that there are cults in the cult of Trump that are telling their own members that God is using Trump. It's these new apostolic reformation, the seven mountain dominionists, the Christian nationalists, where the control of behavior, information, thoughts, and emotion, my BITE model of authoritarian control, is in play. And people believe their leader is an apostle or a prophet who speaks directly to God. And their prophet told them that God said Trump won the 2020 election. Don't listen to satanic media, and don't let demons attack you. I am able to get rid of demons and exorcise them and do faith healing. But the point is there are 30, 40 million Americans who voted for Trump, but because their prophet or apostle told them to. So it's not about Trump having these powers, incredible persuasive powers and all of that. He does know NLP, in my opinion.
It's more of a divine intervention from their perspective.
Right. But what I want to say to your listeners is if you have a relative who's religiously anti-Trump, the best people to talk with them are other people who are Christians, for example. I'm Jewish, so I would not be the right person. But there are Christians who know the Bible inside and out and can quote Jesus. And they can be like, hey, when was the last time you read the New Testament? Want to do a Bible study together? And what do you make of this passage where Jesus talks about how hard it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven? I'm just curious. This is Jesus's words. And to start reminding people of what actually Christianity teaches versus this prosperity, wishful thinking, Norman Vincent Peale, power of positive thinking nonsense.
I had Representative James Tallarico on the show a few weeks ago. He's out of Texas. He's a very religious Christian, gives great sermons, and completely denounces this far-right Christian nationalist movement that Donald Trump has got himself involved with. And it's very interesting talking to people of faith where the word Christian might appear, but it actually has a very different meaning to him than it does to these extremists. It is important, isn't it, that we differentiate between the extreme nationalism and moderate Christianity.
Yeah, totally. So I have a graphic. You've seen it before, and forgive me for holding it up. It's called the Influence Continuum, and it's on my freedomofmind.com website. You can download it for free. But to understand, there's ethical churches and religious groups that give informed consent, that respect your conscience, that want you to have critical thinking and ask questions, and you're free to leave if you're not happy. and these mind control authoritarian cults that are using religious doctrine, but are basically putting themselves up in the role of a Sun Myung Moon or a David Koresh or a Jim Jones. And again, it's about, and I should quote something from the New Testament where it's described, even the elect are deceived in the last days, and but again, it's a matter of understanding who you're talking to, what motivated them, like what were the buttons that got pushed in their mind that made them think that this was a good option to vote GOP. And from my take, most of the messaging has been anti-Kamala Harris, anti-Walz, anti-Biden, anti-democratic,
yes.
Not how great, the
right.
GOP is.
Yes. That's very interesting, isn't it? Because we know that Russia interfered with this election, as they have done the previous two elections too. Despite Trump and his Russia and denial of the Mueller report and all that stuff, nobody really bothered to read it. But ultimately, he was, named as effectively a co-conspirator.
The actual names of some of the Russian agents were
right.
in the Mueller report. Yeah,
and even now, we had a senior Kremlin spokesperson say, we helped Trump get elected. He now has to do something for us. And he was referencing Ukraine, I presume. But what's so interesting here is we have this information. We know that they influenced the election. We struggle, though, to communicate to people how. Because their kind of psyops are very subtle. I mean, arguably the Russians are probably the experts at this stuff. And, whether it be through social media or whether it be through this psychological warfare whereby Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, Joe Biden, much negative coverage that people either felt that they couldn't vote for them or they stayed home. I mean, we saw nearly 13 million people stay home in this election.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is proof to me that these psyops are clearly working.
Yeah, so I'm going to push back a little bit with you, Anthony, and say that in my research for the cult of Trump, I learned about fourth-generation psychological warfare. It was first explicated by William Lind in the 80s, an American military strategist who talked about going after experts, science, and democratic institutions as a psychological means to create such uncertainty and distrust that it would ready for an authoritarian influence. He paired up with a Christian right strategist, Paul Weyrich, and we know for a fact William Lind went to the White House and met with Donald Trump. So it's not just the Russians know about psyops, but Americans who've been co-opted, whether ideologically, monetarily, or blackmailed. Those are the three typical reasons that people do treasonous things or can be persuaded to betray their country and their values. So, but I guess I also want to say that it's not magical, it's not mystical. One of my teachers is Rand Waltzman of the Information Professionals Association. You might invite him on your program for a future thing. And he does, especially on LinkedIn, little graphics every single day explaining another technique of mind control, disinformation. He calls it cognitive warfare. And what I want to say to all your listeners is it's your mind and you need to control it. And the way you can make sure you keep your integrity is to understand these techniques so you can protect yourself and your loved ones. Burying yourself into, binge watching, movies or video games is not going to protect you in the years ahead.
It's a
with
convenient
AI.
distraction, though, from reality, which is pretty harsh. And I guess that's why Netflix and the like have seen so much success recently, is because people do want to shut themselves away. So what you're saying, and it's very interesting, and I mean, I completely get the point that you're making, that whilst we naturally might want to blame foreign intervention in our elections, that actually there are enough wealthy Americans who want Trump to be elected that are behind a lot of these operations as well.
Absolutely. So I want to call out the Coke industry, the second largest private corporation, the ones that are pushing free speech, but don't talk about global warming and climate crisis, because they're into fossil fuels big time, right? But they want free speech, and they don't want regulations. That's the whole thing. The big tech companies, they don't want regulations. And if the Democrats were elected, that's what was coming down the pike. Google has been sued for Chrome as a monopoly. And if you're into libertarianism and Ayn Rand, selfishness is good, greed is good, and altruism is evil, if you're into that ideology, then of course you're going to spend a lot of money and resources manipulating the algorithms on all your social media platforms for your own advantage. But where it doesn't make sense to me, because these people are very intelligent, is they don't seem to grasp that they're killing our planet, our habitat. And unless you're on board with Elon Musk's transhumanism and long-termism ideology that we're all going to put our consciousness in androids and fly to Mars, and give up on Earth because it's going to go extinct anyway, so what the hell, and push crypto so that we won't pay taxes and have police and fire and hospital and pay our bills. You know what I'm saying? That this crazy cult ideology stuff. And honestly, I haven't said this in an interview before, but we know that Elon Musk is doing a lot of drugs. He's doing ketamine, he's doing a lot of psychedelics. And you know how easy it is to mind control and hypnotize someone who's stoned out of their mind? So easy for bad actors to put these crazy ideas in his head that it doesn't matter.
And he does wield an awful lot of power. I seem to remember when he first tried to buy Twitter, and, he couldn't raise the money, and they put the price up, and there was all that, and eventually they agreed on $44 billion, and then it kind of was stopped, and then he had to go back, and he tried to renege on the deal, and in the end the courts forced him to do it. And a lot of us were saying, why would you pay that much? Why do you want that? We didn't realize at the time that he was this kind of far-right supremacist, white supremacist, as he has turned out to be. But we now, with hindsight, can see why taking ownership of the town square in Twitter, rewriting the algorithm, and basically serving up a cocktail of this extremist rhetoric to people, radicalized many of the users, and certainly had an effect on the election result. Then, of course, he came out for Trump fully and then started using his money to buy votes in swing states at $1 million a pop.
Yeah, exactly. But remember, he got money from the Saudis, from Putin, from other people who had vested interest. And going back to my BITE model of authoritarian control, if I may, the I is information control. And what I want to say, to your listeners is that human beings, our brains, our bodies, are information processing organs. We depend on the information coming into our mind, into our ears, through our eyes, and it alters our brain functioning, especially if we're spending hours and hours and hours. And what people need to understand, it's a simple principle, but they need to understand that when a lie is repeated over and over and over again, the brain starts kind of coding it as true. Because I think evolutionarily, we if something's true, not true, we walk away.
Right.
We don't keep allowing the lie to keep getting repeated over and over again. It hacks our brains.
Donald Trump has used this tactic for a decade now, the repetition. Some say that he stole the idea from Hitler speeches, which he was a big fan of. This idea that if you say it enough times, then people will start to believe it.
I think he was very aware of that. Yeah.
Right. And what I'm interested in now, I don't know if you saw Jeff Bezos was interviewed a couple of days ago. He, you may remember, prevented the Washington Post from endorsing a candidate, or Kamala Harris, certainly. Right. And he was interviewed a couple of days ago, and he said he was very optimistic about Donald Trump's presidency, and he alluded to deregulation. And again, I was like, there it is again. That clearly, if you are of the super rich, I mean, I don't know why there would be a desire to have more money than Jeff Bezos has already, or Musk, or any of these people. But there is something about the power and the control that is clearly intoxicating for these people. And whilst deregulation might be great for his business, it could be potentially very dangerous for the rest of us, including people working at Amazon facilities, for example.
Absolutely. And so when he held back the editors wanting to endorse the Democrats, I knew that Trump was going to win the election. For me, that was the tell.
Interesting.
And there were all these editors and major opinion writers who resigned.
Yes.
And when that happened, I'm like, they don't understand. We're in information warfare. That's an act you do when in normal times, not when we're in information warfare. You don't take away your platform to keep communicating your critical thinking ideas. But they resigned. But it's very hard for normal working people to imagine the mind of an Elon Musk or a Donald Trump or a Sun Myung Moon or a Jim Jones. But if you spend as many decades as I have studying these people, you learn how to build a model and step into it and go, aha. And they don't think and react like they're, grounded in reality.
I didn't realize, maybe it's my naivety growing up in the UK, but I didn't realize the extent of the human capacity to be so selfish and evil, it seems, and yet present a very sociable front. And with people like Musk and Bezos, Musk we always thought of as being this incredible engineer, this brilliant mind, this Tony Stark style person.
Yeah, he wants you to think that.
Right, and that's the thing. That was our projection.
Right.
That was the media's projection. But he was never that guy. He was always this South African white supremacist who, I actually met him when he was running PayPal, and he seemed to be a completely different person. And I think that some people now who know him and are in his orbit have said that he has changed unrecognizably. Do you think it is a personality shift, or do you think that person was always deep inside?
No, I'm working off. Well, first of all, we know he's Asperger's. And I actually interviewed from my podcast Tony Attwood, the world's authority on, is an Australian doctor, authority on Asperger's, and asked him about Elon Musk. So neuroatypical folks are not neurotypical, so you have to understand the particular wiring of each person. But no, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he wasn't born evil. He may have had all kinds of authoritarian influences in his childhood, but I do believe that his brain was hacked, and I do think it may have been hypnosis. Maybe it was on a ketamine trip. I don't know.
His trans child had a lot to do with this as well. When he speaks
Good point.
He speaks of his child's transition as being woke and something that he couldn't get his head around, and obviously they're not connected anymore. But that, to me, pushed him into that kind of MAGA Republican camp.
I've had clients who were very staunch Democrats, and their kids had all of a sudden said, "I'm trapped in the wrong body. I'm the other sex." And they're like, there was no signal at all. My kid's been on YouTube watching out, algorithmic, transitioner videos forever and getting stoned. But they became GOP. They became very right-wing.
Very interesting. I mean, I grew up with several trans people, and it's something that to me is very normal.
Yeah.
But to a lot of these people, the MAGA brigade have never met a trans person, and yet they have all these extreme opinions. And this notion that kids might watch YouTube and then decide to change gender is so far from reality, as is the idea that there's any kind of medical gender reassignment going on under the age of 18. I mean, these things are simply not true. And yet there is this movement, though, to think that your kid will go to school one day as a boy and you'll pick them up in the afternoon and they'll be a girl.
Right. So this is an incredibly complex thing, and we can talk about it for many, many hours. Yeah. And I'm a therapist first and foremost, a human rights advocate. My son is gay. My primary care physician is a trans woman. So to state that, but I have a theory that the Christian right that wants us to think the Earth is 6,000 years old, that Darwinism is false and satanic, that doesn't want science around global climate change, etc., that these folks who truly believe that gay people are evil and they need to be killed, this homophobia stuff is kind of the trans stuff was like a tip of a Trojan horse spear against being gay. That's just a theory of mine. And these folks hated J.K. Rowling for the success of Harry Potter. And how smart or clever to turn a lot of her followers against J.K. Rowling because of her position, for women's rights and questioning, do we really want to give up women having equal rights to men? We fought for it for 100 years. And et cetera, et cetera. But it's very complicated, and I know we're going to get lots of interesting, reactions to what we were just talking about. But I can tell you, I work with ex-Heaven's Gate people who thought they were aliens trapped in a human body, and 8 men had their testicles removed because they were convinced they were aliens. And I work with people who were straight, who were getting sodomized by their cult leader, who was saying it's not sex that is being done in your rectum. And so I've had many cult experiences to make me question, just how much identity can be messed around with.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I want to talk. We've got to take a break, but I want to talk after the break about this very performative aspect of MAGA Republicanism, where they do present this false sense of perfection. And that if you are in the Mar-a-Lago set, then you are, you have to look a certain way and present a certain way. There's no room for flaws or humanity, it seems. We'll do that next here on The Weekend Show. How's your holiday season shopping going? Mine is slow. But it is the season to liven up dinner, and you could gift an endless variety of tasty food from award-winning chefs with Cook Unity. That's right, dozens of chefs offering a wide variety of cuisine. You can select from over 350 meals or have them pick them for you. Made, prepared, and delivered right to your door. Easy and effortless. Choose from hundreds of meals. No cleanup, no meal planning. Meals delivered fully cooked. Just heat in as little as 5 minutes. Flexible, commitment-free subscriptions. Skip deliveries, pause or cancel anytime. It does sound like the perfect gift for the holidays. Their roster of all-star chefs includes James Beard Award winners, acclaimed restaurateurs, balancing flavor and nutrition in small batch meals sent fresh and not frozen. Give the gift of delivering mouth-watering meals crafted by local ingredients and award-winning chefs with Cook Unity. Go to cookunity.com/weekend and enter code WEEKEND before checkout for 50% off your first week. That's 50% off your first week using code WEEKEND or by going to cookunity.com/weekend. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof like Alo or Allbirds or Skims, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, and the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions by up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/weekend, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/weekend to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/weekend. We're back on the Weekend Show with Dr. Steven Hassan. I'm Anthony Davis. Just before the break, we were talking about this idea that many of the people in Donald Trump's orbit, including Trump himself, who's very visual, isn't he? He talks a lot about people being good-looking or having good genes, and he obviously has a very different. He's very vain himself. Apparently, I heard the other day that he hates being photographed in profile. He likes to look straight on, and the way he wears the crisp shirt, a new shirt every day, I heard, and the tie extra long, and the some kind of gusset or something to kind of hide his gut, and also changing his height and his weight and all of these things. It's very interesting that the visual, this idea of a visual perfection, and I think about Alina Habba, one of Trump's lawyers. I follow her Instagram. I've become slightly obsessed with it, but everything is so perfectly coiffured. Everything. The way that she presents herself and her family and everything that they're getting up to, and they're drinking champagne, and it's almost like Florida people. Not all Florida people, but there is a set, that kind of West Palm Beach set, that Trump and people in his orbit kind of feel like that is the nirvana for humanity, and that everybody should aspire to that. Do you understand? Do you recognize that type that I'm talking about?
Yeah. So, in my BITE model of authoritarian control, I talk about change of clothing amongst many other things. And my model is based on Robert J. Lifton's work with Chinese communist brainwashing from the 50s. And he talked about he has 8 criteria, one of which is demand for purity. And this notion that you should look perfect and you should always feel guilty if you don't reach that standard or perfection. But it's a tool of manipulation to make you always feel like you're deficient.
Wow.
In order to fit into the group identity.
Wow.
That's being established.
That is remarkable, isn't it? Because hearing that and just thinking about the way that they present, because they all look the same. I mean, when, Trump has his family photo, it's almost like everybody's kind of an identikit perfect person. And that in itself, they try to be aspirational with it, but it doesn't work with me, and I'm hoping that it doesn't work with most. But there is still this idea that people weren't just voting for Trump because they thought the price of eggs would come down, but they're voting for royalty. They're voting for this family and his access to all of these wealthy individuals. And if we look at his nominees for these cabinet positions, he's basically chosen sycophants, yes men, mostly white males, I should say. I think there's one person of color in the group, but also people who are wholly unqualified. If we use Pete Hegseth as an example, a white Christian nationalist, Fox News host, covered in these tattoos, but very good looking, beautiful hair, a square jawline. That's what Trump looks for. He's almost doing central casting when it comes to these nominations. Do you find that as interesting as I do?
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess I want to say that Mark Burnett, who is one of the leaders in the Seven Mountain Dominionist organization movement, selected Donald Trump and made an illusion that he was a successful businessman.
Right.
That he was this amazing person that needed to be followed and worshipped. So
this is the creator of The Apprentice, we should say.
Thank you. I left out the obvious, but
it's okay.
It's so much of it is about creating illusion. And what I also want to talk about is with the cult dynamic. I would meet people who saw my former cult leader and say, did you actually think he had charisma? Because the guy had zip charisma. Yeah. But my point is as a believer, you project all of your fantasies of greatness onto the cult leader.
It's like the Rambo cartoons we see of Trump, where he's a strong man. In reality, he's an obese kind of senior who wears makkup.
Who has dementia. Yeah, well.
Yet the projection of him, and I've seen, I saw someone driving a Tesla Cybertruck that was wrapped in this kind of Trump muscle man graphic.
Yeah. So another point I want to make, Anthony, is that people falsely believe that humans are rational.
Yeah.
And we are emotional beings. We're social beings. We're the social animal, Elliot Aronson's famous sociology textbook. And people were voting for Trump out of emotion, not out of policies or rational thought. And here's the thing that I want to explain to your listeners. It's when you create so much overload of information in a short amount of time, it overwhelms our critical faculties, and it kind of like goes into numbness, and it readies people to just follow somebody who has certainty, who says, trust me, I know what you need to do to get out of this mess. But it's not rational. It has nothing to do with policy. But it's this emotional belief, kind of like Big Daddy, help me, of a child. I don't know what to do. And coming back to the beginning of our talk, it's like I want the public to get out of this paralyzation of hopelessness, and they're going to take us over and we'll lose everything. It's like, first of all, we have states.
Yes.
There will be governors. I live in Massachusetts. We have a gay governor. And it's not, people will lay down only if they believe they have to lay down. And I'm saying, come on, we're Americans. We grew up knowing what Russia was like, China is like. We don't want to be Russia. We don't want to just be put into prison like Navalny and murdered or poisoned or have a plane blow up. And, let's really get real and roll up our sleeves and say, not on my watch.
But the propaganda machine is in overdrive still, even since the election. You'll notice that Trump was saying right the way up to the election that if I don't win, it's going to be rigged. And then, of course, the moment he wins, he doesn't talk about election interference or anything ever again.
Because he interfered with the election? No.
Because he interfered with the election. And so, and what I find really interesting is that we have people like Tucker Carlson, for example, former Fox News host, who's gone back to Russia and posted a report a couple of days ago threatening that there would be World War III unless we kind of understood the geopolitical situation better. Just rewriting the narrative with Putin talking points.
Yeah.
Because the guy that we've elected to be president of the United States sides with Russia over Ukraine. He considers European and NATO allies as enemies until proven otherwise. I mean, this is unprecedented. And certainly in my lifetime, I never thought I would see this in the United States take hold so quickly. It's been less than a decade that this kind of Trumpism, whether it be led by Russia or led by the Christian nationalist movement or led by the Heritage Foundation or the Federalist Society, any of these advocacy groups for this extremism, that they've managed to take hold, not least the Supreme Court, which used to be one of the guardrails, now sold off completely to the highest bidder.
So this is where we differ, you and I, and it's only because I was in the frickin' room with Sun Myung Moon in 1974 when he said that we have to infiltrate the government and that God thinks that democracy is satanic. We need to install a theocracy. And when we take power in America, we're going to change the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people who violate our rules. And I got deprogrammed in 1976, and I was an average nice boy from Flushing, Queens, who protested the Vietnam War and thought Nixon was evil. But I fasted for Nixon for 3 days because Moon said that God wants him to be president. My point is, when I got out of the group and I studied Chinese communist brainwashing and talked with former military intelligence people, I'm like, this is for real. This group has a newspaper in the nation's capital doing broadcasting for TV, and every Republican president is holding up the Washington Times. And so I've been living this, and people are like, Steve, you're a bit obsessed. How come you're still doing cult stuff 48 years after getting out? It's because, warning, canary in the coal mine. I understand this mindset, and now it's coming into fruition.
It must be growing, because in the 1970s, we didn't have social media. We didn't have Facebook groups. We didn't have these targeted algorithmic propaganda machines. So you would actually have to go out and talk to people, as you did when you were younger, girls in a bar, I seem to remember. But now you can stay home in your pajamas and be scrolling and be reprogrammed without having to leave the house.
Exactly. But I want to tell you a quick story, true story. August 2015, I was asked to be at an invitation-only Aspen Institute meeting, a State Department counterterrorism meeting against ISIS recruitment online. Madeleine Albright was there, Richard Haass, Rich Stengel, Monica Biggert from Facebook, Scott Armstrong from Google, like a lot of luminaries were in the room. And I saw a demonstration, Anthony, of an AI supercomputer that was capable of monitoring in real time 20 different languages of everything that was being put online. And the fellow whose system it was liked me because his father gave him combating cult mind control, he said, when he was 15, because his nanny was trying to recruit him into a cult. So he was like a fan of mine. And he was talking about how ISIS recruits online. He said, think of STDs. The more sex you have with someone with syphilis, the more likely you are to contract it. And we're all like, that kind of makes sense. And he said they identify a person, whether it's on a video gaming platform, a matchmaking, and they swarm, which we used to call love bombing in real life, swarm them, get them to other locations on the internet, and start to program them. And I'm saying to him, there's a presidential election next year. What are you going to do with this system? He said, oh, Hillary's people only want to pay me $10,000 a month. I can't pay my electrical bill for that. And I said, I hope you don't go to the dark side. He said, I don't want to, but I have partners. And then he sold the company. And guess who's been doing mimetic warfare ever since on the world using the supercomputer? And I'm sure the supercomputer has gone through many evolutionary changes.
We don't. Well, go on. I'll let you do the reveal.
No, it's just like people need to understand that technology.
There's money being made from this as well. That's the other thing, is that it is a huge business. I mean, I think of Cambridge Analytica with the Brexit vote in England and
exactly.
in Europe.
It was used for that, I'm sure.
Right. Huge amounts of money changing hands for data mining. But what's so interesting to me is that we think of, when we talk about election interference, people in its simplest form might think that someone's coming and fiddling with the voting machine, but it's not that at all. It happens way earlier than that. And we might have thought of it because we hear from the FBI, or they've traced some hacking to a Russian IP account and it's coming from the Kremlin and blah, blah, blah. But it's not just a solitary Russian or a bunch of individuals, Chinese hackers sitting in a room. It is millions and millions of zeros and ones, billions of zeros and ones that are all trained to be hackers from within the computer. And
they know social psychology principles, and they understand profiling, and they understand nudging, and they understand positive reinforcement or punishment. And they're very systematic about it because they just don't want America to be the world power that says no to Putin and his aggression.
Well, in that case, they've succeeded, because
it appears so temporarily.
As far as we can see. And look, there are uprisings happening all over the world at the moment. I mean, Germany's government collapsed this week. France's government collapsed this week. South Korea's government collapsed this week. We're seeing a lot of turbulence in even Western societies that we thought were unbreakable. The democracies that we felt were strong, as we always thought America's democracy would be everlasting. But clearly that is not the case.
No, we're in uncharted new territory. I interviewed Greg Epstein on his fine new book, Tech Agnostic. He's the Harvard MIT humanist chaplain who said that big tech is the world new religion, and that people, instead of going like this to pray, are going like this to pray and scrolling. And I'm listening to Harari's book Nexus, and he was talking about how money was invented 5,000 years ago, but is moving to information as the currency. And cults like China, they have social credits. You do what they want, you get some credits, and if you don't follow the rules, you get demerits. And that's how we're going to get food and everything else down the road, especially if they go crypto, because the U.S. dollar will not be what the U.S. dollar has always been. What's interesting, though, if I may just add, is that China owns so much of U.S. debt that they're not going to want the U.S. dollar to completely collapse,
right,
where Putin wants it to collapse. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic between China and Russia.
I remember reading back in 2016 when Trump won. So there was some great journalism at the time saying that the future of the kind of political power in the US will be the tech giants and Silicon Valley.
Ian Bremmer, that's one of his major theses, is that these tech billionaires have these corporations that go all around the world, and therefore they have more power than state actors. So they're going to have the new power.
I just thought of an example that we can maybe explain to people. I don't know if you use Amazon and the app. I do. For my sins, but I think that it's rather brilliant. I'm not a fan of Jeff Bezos or the whole the kind of oligarchy behind that, but the business model is just too efficient. I can get stuff delivered same day. I mean, it's mind-blowing. But the app in the last few weeks has become even more intelligent. And today it offered me something that would go nicely with something that I'd thought about buying that I hadn't yet bought.
Mm-hmm.
So it pinged me with a little banner and literally said in like human language, this will go really well with that thing you were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like a shelf for the kitchen. It was very benign, but the algorithm there was no humans behind this. This is all software.
Unless you didn't turn off the microphone on your cell phone and they were recording you and you were saying
I think it's
something.
Just based on my searches.
Okay.
It's following a pattern and a structure, and it's seeing where my brain is going based upon the things that I'm searching for, and it has psychologically profiled me, and it is now offering me things. It's even offering me a discount. If I keep something in the basket and I don't check out, it nudges me and it goes, that thing that you were thinking about, well, it's now $2 off. Would it be a good time to buy it? And, the aviation industry has been doing this for years with volatile pricing on flights, but to now have it targeted to me personally with specific products. The reason I'm saying this is I think that this is a really good, very public example of how software has become so targeted and intelligent that it's making decisions for us and encouraging us to spend money.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was born in 1954, Anthony. I remember listening to the radio. I remember my parents getting a black and white TV. I remember how excited we were when we got a color TV and people were talking about how terrible it was. There were 4 channels, like there were 30.
I remember those days too. So
so I have a frame of reference for normalcy. Like I had friends where we got together and played, threw dirt bombs at each other, table tennis, whatever, football. But now kids are growing up and they're online. And that's, I don't know if you heard, but Australia is wanting to ban social media for people.
It has banned social media for under 16s.
But we know factually, scientifically, it's bad for young minds to be online.
I was talking to my 9-year-old daughter about this. She's never done social media, but she knows that it is as bad as smoking and drinking, just by nature of the conversations we have in the house.
Smart kid.
And so she's decided that she's never going to try alcohol because she fears that she, could get addicted to it. And same with nicotine. And she said, I'm never going to try social media but my fear is, Stephen, that social media is so integrated into other things now. And some apps are designed to not even look like social media when they are social media.
Yep.
And so it will be increasingly difficult to do anything, to book a flight or to even, check your lotto ticket, unless you've got a connected smartphone, and within those apps will be ads and links that will drive you to goods and services and ideas that you didn't even know you needed.
So here's where I have hope, Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of smart people a lot of young smart people.
Yeah.
If they understand the problem, if they have a correct diagnosis of what's going on, they're going to come up with workarounds that are going to give us what we need to live great lives and be connected without all the abuse stuff. And I come back to a principle of we don't have any data privacy regulation in the United States. Zip. And there are, talks, Anita Farahani talks about cognitive security, but we need bright people to not dial out, but go like, we're faced with an existential crisis. We need planetary survival. And we're going to work backwards from planetary survival for what we need to do today. And I do think it's going to be a multi-year project. It's not going to be something that we can do right away. But I do think that a lot of people are not going to just cave to the authoritarians and go, yeah, let's throw out all of American history and World War I and World War II and just say, sure, we'll bow to Russia. Like, I don't see that. I agree.
We'll find out. This is what Trump and his enablers have not accounted for, is the power of people. And we've seen it through the decades, through the civil rights movement, through the women's marches, the BLM movement. There is this great sense of community for humanity.
Yeah.
And so I do have faith in those movements too. The problem this time is that what traditionally we would call the guardrails in American politics have all been scuppered by Trump, winning the House, winning Senate, winning White House, winning Supreme Court. I mean,
well, Opus Dei is a bad actor that I just want to name. I mentioned NAR before. But I interviewed Gareth Gore on his fine book about Opus Dei, which is a Catholic cult that put in the Federalist Society, SCOTUS hack to the Supreme Court. And the guy who did Project 2025 at the Heritage, Opus Dei.
Kevin
so people,
Roberts.
And it's a group I've counseled people out of for decades.
Yeah.
People need to understand this is not the Catholic Church. This is a cult. Mind control, authoritarian cult, and not conducive to anything related to Christianity.
And this is why they want to go after the Department of Education so quickly.
Exactly. They want ignorant people.
They want ignorant people, but they also want people, they claim they don't want people indoctrinated into wokeness through traditional education, but they do want to indoctrinate them into Christian nationalism. So it's their indoctrination, not everybody else's indoctrination, that matters.
Yeah, so I'm going to quote Eric Hoffer, longshoreman, 1954, The True Believer. He said something like, the strength of a mass movement can be measured by the vividness and tangibility of its devil. And if you understand part of mind control is you need a devil and make people afraid of it, and it will get more unity around you. So a lot of what is, but again, it's like if you understand it's a formula, it loses its mystical power. It's just
and the trans person has become the devil in recent political discourse, and we're seeing it with the election of a trans person, which has caused haywire with regard to bathrooms.
Yep.
And it's become a huge thing, and of course it's based on nothing.
It's such a tiny group of people, but I really do believe it's homophobia behind it. And all of these gay people in the Trump orbit are going to need to realize they're being played.
In the same way that immigration is not actually about violent crime committed by immigrants, it's just racism.
Right.
And we've heard this
fear of the other and justification to maybe declare martial law or the Insurrection Act or some other crazy
And we're
thing.
hearing from Tom Homan, who is Trump's pick to be this border czar. He was the architect, of course, of the family separation policy last time around. He's a terrifying character. But, you know, I saw him interviewed. I actually saw him on a private jet with Dr. Phil a few days ago, and they were flying to the border. Dr. Phil, of course, is all in for Trump as well, despite claiming to be non-political and to not really understand it. Yeah. But anyway, he and Tom Homan were kind of broing it up on this private jet, and he was saying, you know, where are we going? What are we going to do? And Tom Homan says, we're going to go to the border, and we're going to find out the truth, and we're going to take these criminals. And I was thinking, wow. I mean, I speak as an immigrant myself. Immigrants come to the U.S. to work, to seek a better life, to have opportunity. They also pay billions of dollars into the American, federal cash flow. Of
course.
And the tiniest percentage of them commit crimes. And those are the ones that Trump ran his campaign against. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats.
Yeah.
I mean, it's remarkable, really, that the bogeyman has become these immigrants into a country that was built by immigrants.
Right. And Trump's family name is Drumpf.
Yes. Right.
D-R-U-M-P-F.
Germans and Scots, yeah.
Yeah, right. I learned that from John Oliver's show before he was even elected. I even bought the hat, the Drumpf hat. Make Donald Drumpf again was the subtitle of that. Yeah, so, I mean, Putin got power in Russia after the Soviet Union fell because he ordered his people to bomb Russian citizens and blame it on the Chechens. Like, you have to understand the mindset of a malignant narcissist, and then you can start to predict and understand how they operate, and they are pretty predictable. But I really want your listeners to have hope and realize you're not alone. And if I don't know what people's situation is. I live in a very blue state, so I'm surrounded by people who have similar values to me. And I know people who live in red states who feel surrounded. But I think it's time to just have the belief we're Americans. We believe in the Constitution. We believe in human rights. We believe in rule of law. And anyone who wants to take away the rule of law and just say, screw it, I'm the king, should irk us enough to action.
I have great hope and faith in people to do the right thing and not to take this lying down. Invariably, it's the minority groups that suffer the most with an authoritarian regime. And I seem to remember during COVID, the Asian hate crime that spiked because of Trump's use of language, China virus and all this stuff. And those people also suffer in silence. They're not the type of people to make a fuss. And that's the saddest part of this story, is that a lot of the abuse that will happen as a result of this next administration will be swept under the rug.
Yeah. So I want to state categorically, I'm not against the Russian people. I think they've been taken advantage of by Putin and oligarchs.
Yeah.
The Chinese people, same.
Yes.
I hear from Chinese people who are being threatened and spied on that they're going to harm their relatives back in China if they say or do anything and such. And Americans should not be looking at Russians, American citizens, or Chinese American citizens and think anything other than they escaped authoritarianism for something better. And they're our future.
Yes. It's interesting, isn't it, how he has painted China as the enemy. I mean, look, last week he was painting Mexico and Canada as the enemy too. But, we couldn't really exist without China now. We are so intertwined from as a trading partner that Trump has no idea, because he doesn't understand international trade or foreign relations or anything. It's not in his wheelhouse.
Right.
He understands a bit of real estate. He's basically just a bad realtor, that you can't get rid of.
He's failed at every business.
Right.
And, so anyway, go on.
So by framing all of these countries as enemies, it is elevating him and elevating this kind of might of America. I always find it ironic that he boasts about us having under him the greatest military, the strongest military, the toughest military, but at the same time he's withdrawing the military from all theaters of war, even as a peacekeeping
and giving our military
force.
Secrets to our enemies.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's so, I never thought he was a genius. He's basically doesn't read. And I put Putin at the top of the Puppet Masters chapter 7 in the Cult of Trump. And it's been validated. His pick for chief of staff was a paid lobbyist for Putin, and she, I'm told, prior to this, it was just not reported in mainstream corporate media that she had this relationship with enemies of America, and now she's going to help run the government. That's scary. And regarding Trump and Vance, I think there's a very good chance that Trump will be on the golf course and won't be doing much of anything.
That is one of the great fears, isn't it? That Trump is tired. He's 78. He's slowing down. He's exhausted. He's demented. And he really just wants to retire. And so he will hand power to people like J.D. Vance, who are far more dangerous because they are, they have their own version of reality.
Yeah, handpicked by TL and Musk.
Right.
They put Vance in power. Yeah, so some people are telling me, I'm going to leave the U.S., and I heard that when he was elected the first time.
Right.
And I don't know, Anthony. I'm not leaving. I mean, they can threaten to arrest me or sue me or whatever. I'm an academic. I'm a scholar. I write journal articles and I do scientific research, and I still believe in freedom of speech.
But you are exactly the type of person that they don't want around. They don't want experts. They don't want expertise or academics. And that's why all of his picks for these cabinet positions are so unqualified. Yeah. Because, getting somebody getting a non-military person to run the military, whether it be Pete Hegseth or Ron DeSantis,
right,
is terrifying. And yet here we are.
Well, what can I say except that the world's a very different place than it was with Hitler in Germany. People escaped Germany as Hitler was assuming power. I just don't know that there's a safer place for me to be than Massachusetts on the planet, honestly.
Right. All right.
And I've left a large body of work, and if they're going to take me out, then I'll be a martyr. I don't want to be a martyr. I'm having a very good life. I want to be around a long time, but it's going to take a lot of people coming together, getting a lot of smart people in a room to say, okay, let's make a plan for how we're going to go through the next bunch of years, and with planetary survival as the goal.
It's so interesting that, the Democrats are kind of missing in action at the moment. I think they're hurting as much as the rest of us. And so we don't feel like we have leadership. Biden is traveling a lot and he's been in Angola and he's been in the Amazon rainforest and all sorts of places. But I do feel that there will be a new generation of leaders that will rise leading Democrats out of this.
May not be a Democratic Party. It may be a different organization. But the key thing is that, and we watch a lot of movies with Marvel characters and other action, and there's always a resistance, right, against the evil empire or the Borg or, whatever. And sign me up for the resistance.
Yeah, the Rebel Alliance. No,
Rebel Alliance.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, let's do the right thing and the human thing. And I don't want people to think that the future is putting our brain, our consciousness into androids and flying to Mars. Sorry, that's delusionary.
Yeah, we don't need that stuff. I mean, that's the other thing. I think this about self-driving cars. I just cannot understand why they're even necessary. And yet with some tech, there is a desire to kind of do the impossible, I suppose. But the problem is that with the exploration of these advances in technology, they are all exploitable. And I think that, the more we know, the more the enemy knows too and has access to us.
So I want to give some words of advice to people, like learn how to regulate your emotional states. Understand breathing is the most powerful way to change your consciousness. If you're feeling anxious, long, slow exhales will calm down your nervous system. And, some people can meditate, some don't, but do what's going to work for you. Some people play with their dog. They go walking in the woods. They punch a punching bag. Do what works for you. But you need to be human. Like, get hugs, get kisses.
Back to basics.
Back to, seriously, eat well, get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Most people are sleep deprived, and it's one of the bite model criteria of brainwashing. If you're sleep deprived, you're not.
Yeah, it's very hard to
thinking clearly.
And also, I think that there is a much greater shift towards independent journalism. And not
like
having
you.
Right, but not having CNN or Fox or any of these networks like just on in the background. I think it's very detrimental to our mental health and to our ability to separate fact from fiction, truth from reality. And so those of us who work in the independent media space, we offer solace, support, the personal touch, a kind of individual, tailored version of what has clearly got out of hand in the corporate-owned media.
Right. But I was listening to the New York Times audio app, and it's like, this ad is by the petroleum industry and how great, fossil fuels are for America. And I'm like, the New York Times is going down the tubes.
Yeah.
Like, we need people who are going to support independent journalism by subscribing. I know I started a Substack because I want to keep
I just
messaging.
did the same on Thanksgiving, actually. I
want to keep doing what I'm doing, and I want to have people amplify my message. I'm very grateful to you for inviting me back on your show to get my word out. And there are tens of millions of ex-cult members in the United States, tens of millions of us, and many of us are still stigmatized and don't want to tell anyone, hey, I grew up in a Christian cult or I grew up in Scientology. But I'm saying let's destigmatize it. It's like intelligent people can be hacked. There's life after cult. Let's normalize it. And let's connect with people who are in MAGA world. So there's an off-ramp. You can share your story with them. You can ask their opinion about a show. There's a HBO Max one on called Breath of Fire about the Yogi Bhajan cult that just came out. That's excellent. Watch this and tell me what you think. How could people be doing what they did? Believing a total fraud was a Kundalini master. who was, raping women and saying all women want to be raped.
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, we heard similar rhetoric from Donald Trump recently, where he said that he's going to protect women whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
And with no sense of irony, as as an adjudicated rapist himself.
Right.
It is remarkable where we find ourselves, but with your explanation, the explanation of those with expertise, there is an answer. There is an explanation. We don't have to suffer in silence and just, scream why.
So as we wrap up, I'm going to tell you a technique I've suggested to some of my former clients who were in a cult and the leader claimed to be God or have these supernatural powers. I had them visualize the cult leader to be like a foot tall in diapers on the, so they're looking down and they laugh. And it's like, think of Donald Trump as 1 foot tall in diapers whenever you think of Donald Trump.
It's a horrible
It's going to have a very different emotional attachment.
Yeah. What he wants, and I do firmly believe that him being shot at helped his election chances as well. The way he weaponized
very suspicious.
That image of the fight and the blood was all very helpful for his election. But that's the person he wants us to think that he is.
Right.
And he really isn't. He is a coward at heart, and a very selfish one at that.
Yeah, who thinks that all service people are suckers because he got out of service by feigning a foot injury because he had a wealthy dad. Yeah.
Okay. Listen, we have to finish, but I'm very pleased to have spoken to you again, and I'm very thrilled for the opportunity to have an extended conversation, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, thanks so much. Be well. I look forward to seeing you again in person.
You bet.
To get out to the West Coast.
Okay.
Thanks for all your good work, Anthony.
My pleasure. Dr. Steven Hassan, thank you for joining The Weekend Show. I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5 Minute News. You can see more from me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel. And I'll be back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.